It looks like our Q&A is already blowing up. You guys are great. There are some questions here. I do want to start with this one because I think it's important. We always say to start engaging very early with regulatory agencies, but we do have a question here: when to start engaging with FDA and other regulatory agencies during mRNA process development. Tiffany, you are almost fresh out of the FDA, so I'm curious to hear what you would say. You know, can you give us a very specific answer, right, in terms of when is the best time, right, during process development to be having these conversations?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I just left the FDA Center for Biologics as a gene therapy reviewer for CMC, so products, so you're going to get that perspective a lot today. And the FDA is very encouraging to sponsors to engage early. And so there are a number of mechanisms that you can do that with. For example, there are interact meetings where things are very early concept phase, where you will have the opportunity to spend a lot of time working with the preclinical pharm tox folks as well as CMC. There are also the pre-IND meetings, and then that should help you get everything in a row. There are other special designations that you can interact with the FDA during your phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 development. So engage early. And I also encourage you, when you do engage, ask really meaningful questions that will help guide your clinical program. So put in thoughtful questions in those meeting packages when you do seek to engage with the agency.
Ulrika, do you have anything to add there? I know, and I would say too, with the EMA, you know, have there been what has been sort of the recipe for success for you and your teams in engaging the agency early? Like, when do you start and how do you start that engagement? What would you consider to be meaningful questions to be asking?
Yeah, I think FDA also in Europe, you do have different formats how you can interact early with the agency. For example, in Europe, you have the Innovation Task Force at EMA that you can ask an early advice with if you have really something innovative that you want to get really some early thoughts on. Then, of course, you do have the normal, quote unquote, EMA regulatory scientific advice that you can request. But in Europe, you can also, if you, for example, want to get early input on clinical trial that you want to invest in, you could also go to a national member state authority. All the countries have individual national member state authorities in the preparation for your phase 1 study. Mm-hmm. And as Tiffany said, the quality of the question determines the quality of the response usually, right? So you have to be thoughtful and also know your stuff, quote unquote, right? Mm-hmm. You should not go there and ask, could you please design for us a clinical study, right? I mean, you go there with an idea, with a concept, and you ask whether the agency is in concordance with your suggestion. Mm-hmm. And that's how you mm-hmm. invest in scientific advices. And also, I mean, usually all the regulatory authorities have been very helpful and very supportive. And so they also send signals that you should come early, and you can also come as your product development progresses. You should take, I think, every advantage out of these meetings, that you can really go the next steps together with an aligned agency approval for the next steps, right?